So, we ready to start? Everyone's on mute, can't answer, right? Well, I was going to say welcome to the regular Planning Commission meeting, Grand Blanc Township, August 6th, 2020. I don't know if this is really a regular Planning Commission meeting. This is our regular date, but a little bit irregular with the use of Zoom. Looks like we have 8 out of our 9 Planning Commission members in attendance. We've got Mr. Brown, Mr. Bandersky, Ms. Coulter, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Yansho, Mr. Mansour, Mr. Gellings, and the only one unable to be with us this evening is Mr. Horsha. Also, Planning and Zoning, we have Mr. Mark Lloyd, and of course, from Beckett and Rader, we have Leah Dumichelle, I think is your last name, and then you also have, is it Madison that's assisting you tonight?
That's correct.
All right. First thing we'll do is approval of this evening's agenda. Do we have any Planning Commission members have any changes? If not, I don't know if anyone would like to unmute themselves and make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Is the agenda the one on the screen?
So moved.
No, the agenda is the one that was sent out by Maria.
Okay, I'll make the motion to approve the agenda. This is the Dolores Folder.
Motion by Dolores, support for that by,
I'll second it.
and that was Mr. Johnson.
Support it. Say.
All right, motion to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying, I guess aye, or do we raise our hands, or how do we do this? I guess we'll try aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Okay, motion passes 8-0. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our June 30th meeting. Mr. Bandersky, do we have any changes?
No, there are a couple of minor things that I communicated to back to the township. So at this point, I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes of June 30th.
Okay, motion by Mr. Bandersky to approve the minutes as presented with a couple of minor modifications. Support for that?
Support. Dolores.
Support by Ms. Coulter. All those in favor signal by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 8-0. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity for public comment, which is normally for anything that is not on our agenda. This evening, of course, we're going through discussion on the master plan. I don't know, Leah, is there going to be a time later where we can get the comments from public after they've had some opportunities to see what we're presenting?
Yes, after the slideshow, there's a time for questions.
Awesome. So if anyone that's joining us that wanted to bring up something other than related to the master plan, now would be the time. So if not, we'll close public comment, move on with the agenda. Normally, this would be correspondence. I didn't see any planning and zoning sent electronically. So I don't think there's any correspondence. This brings us to our master plan discussion. So we've had a steering committee that's been working with Beckett and Rader, going through the different sections of the master plan And we now have everything kind of pulled together for kind of a final draft for review here by the Planning Commission before it's put out there to get more public input. I find it pretty impressive how it all has come together. There's been a lot of people that have provided input. Some on the Planning Commission have been very involved, especially Mr. Manser. And I think Beck and Rader's done a great job of pulling this together. Mr. Lloyd, is there something you want to go through, maybe from a historical perspective? Is he still there?
Yep, I'm just unmuting myself.
Okay.
Well,
great.
you bet I do. And, thank you everybody for your attendance and, just appreciate your diligence in working to get onto this remote session. I do want to point out that from some of the names that I've heard of folks who are in attendance, I know that some of them, I hope, have interest overall in the general master plan that we worked on and put together. But I do know that a couple of them are interested in some of the properties and the property exercise that the commission did. So I do want to say for everyone's benefit that may not be an item that we get into this evening, at least not too deep. It's just a matter of timing, because tonight is intended, I think, to more introduce the master plan, identify some of those circumstances, and if we by chance have the ability and the time to get into some of these other matters a little deeper, we will. But keep in mind that there will also be other opportunities to dig a little deeper into that. And that's our goal and objective. And I do want to say for those folks who are here on that behalf, that the Planning Commission did undertake the exercise of doing some review. We have not put all of our notes together on that yet. So thank you for your continued interest. So tonight, we're moving forward, and we're doing that in accordance with the wonderful state of Michigan's Planning Enabling Act. And that allows us, and it actually requires us as a Planning Commission to make and approve a master plan. And that master plan is intended to be designed for and identify the physical development that is intended to occur within the township. And it needs to be amended from time to time, and that's a big part of what we're doing here. So we worked on this for, gosh, going on a year now. And at this point in time, the steering committee's completed their draft plan, and they've asked that this be forwarded on to the Planning Commission for our consideration at this level. And hopefully we're going to be able to get through this in relatively uncomplicated time and make this understandable to everybody. And I would agree with Dan that this is very well prepared plan. Thank you very much, Leah, and the entire team at Beckett and Rader. So we've got a little bit of history that I want to bring into focus for just a moment, because a lot of the history and information from past plans, of course, gets continued forward. So we had a plan that was adopted back in 2010, and then it was updated in 2013. That's our most recent one. The 2010 plan was a very general plan, a lot like the one that we're looking at and doing today. The 2013 plan was more of a focus plan for the technology village, and that was the primary focus. It did an update of a lot of the data points and stuff, but it was primarily intended to simply allow for and provide for the technology village. Again, I mentioned this is a relatively general plan, but let's not forget that even though it may not be focused like on a technology village, it also identifies and references the Downtown Development Authority, which is a new agency for the township. And so keep in mind that that's a necessity for us to have in our master plan, so that we have consistency between the DDA plan and the township's master plan. Those are important. Some of you may remember that back in January of 2018, we had a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the board. We brought forward an update, work that the Planning Commission had done up to that point in time, and brought an update to the Township Board and the Planning Commission on how and what we might do to move forward with the master plan. At that time, we had a proposal for nearly $80,000. We had a consultant at the time that provided that, and kind of thought that maybe it was an opportunity to step back a little bit. And so we prepared an RFP request for proposals and sent that out. And we did get responses from 5 different agencies. And we ended up getting this project done for less than $40,000. So point being, it pays to do a little bit of extra work on behalf of the township and their residents, save them a few dollars. Plus, we wanted to make sure that we had a very good and effective plan. So the one thing that we realized early on, and everybody these days does, is it's the most important component of the planning effort is the feedback we get, the survey data, the community engagement. And we've done pretty good. We have nearly 750 survey responses. That's more than I've ever had or seen in my history. And I work in Ann Arbor. So this is a big number. We had over 100 students surveyed, and we have their responses. And that's kind of new for a lot of communities. Not everybody's going out trying to find out what students, people of that age, are interested in, but we felt that that would be an important component of this, and so we did go out and we had a handful of meetings, 5, I think, different classes over there at the high school, and I think that went well. And we did have a number of meetings in a box, and we had 10 different steering committee meetings, so we have been working on this. I guess now that we're at this point, maybe looking back, it doesn't seem like it's been that difficult, that's for sure, but we've done an awful lot of work when you start to really take a look at that. So now the plan is up to the Planning Commission. The draft work has been done. We're hoping to get this done by the end of the year for sure, and we expect we're going to have a number of additional meetings, and just for the benefit of all of you to start thinking about the timing, as well as folks in the audience, and please, these dates are subject to change, but so we can get a sense of things. We would likely follow up with a meeting in September on the 3rd Planning Commission, on October 1st Planning Commission, November 5th Planning Commission. We'll have an open house or workshop, and then we have the 63-day mandatory public hearing that needs to occur. So we will have more opportunities for not just this group to communicate and put the final version together, but also for more public input and additional input from all the commissioners. So I think, Mike, you and I talked a little bit earlier tonight, and I didn't feel like we got to finish that. My phone cut out, and I wanted to say, yeah, you'll have an opportunity throughout this whole thing. If an idea comes up, I mean, we're not going to stop you from bringing ideas forward. We'd like it to be over and get our comments soon so we can really buckle down. But you know what? The door's going to always be open on this, you know, unless we just absolutely have to close it early. But we're going to take as many comments and as much input as we can. That's what we've been doing all along, and we think that that's served us well so far. So with that, I'd just like to say again, thank you to Leah and her entire crew over there. They've done a magnificent job, and thanks for keeping us on track through this rather difficult time as well. That hasn't been easy, and I personally think that you've done a very good job, and just want to express my gratitude for that and true appreciation for your professionalism. So hopefully that is just going to continue to show itself. I know it will. So Leah, it's up to you now. You're on.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. I've really, really enjoyed this project. I think I've met most of you before, but there's a couple in the audience that I haven't, so I'll just introduce myself. My name is Leah Dumichel, and I've been the lead on this project for my firm, Beckett and Rader, which our headquarters and where I work out of is in Ann Arbor, but we also have offices in Petoskey and Traverse City. I am actually from the township and grew up really just up the street from Township Hall, right up until I moved to Ann Arbor. So this has been a project that I have been very invested in and have very much enjoyed, really, you know, getting to work with you folks and participating in the future of my hometown. So I very much appreciated it. So what I'm going to do is go through a slideshow that basically kind of covers the highlights. So, you know, the table of contents here in the plan itself, we cover the planning history, we cover demographics. Neither of those am I going to get into very much. I'm just going to go right into the meat of land use, natural features, the services, facilities, and assets of the township, housing and neighborhoods, centers, the nodes and activity places in the township, and then circulation and corridors of the roads. The text in here does relate to the planning context. We talked a little bit about Grand Blanc Township has a very extensive and well-maintained planning history. So you are a community that has regularly engaged in planning, and it shows, and sort of built upon the findings. And so we summarize that a little bit in the planning history. So it seems that this plan is kind of ushering sort of a new era of planning here. The last kind of round of plans, as Mark mentioned, was really focused on the tech village and on the DDA formation and area. There's a lot of thought and detail that goes into that. And with that kind of, buttoned down and ready to go, the focus has shifted to some detailed attention to the northern part of the township, the gateway, specifically on Saginaw Road, but also on Door Highway. And one thing that has come through that you'll hear a number of times in this presentation is non-motorized travel, the paths, the sidewalks, the alternatives to car travel for both recreation and transportation. We heard that from every quarter. And so you will be, we'll be discussing it in great detail in the plan. That seems like what's up next for us. So Mark has gone over the community engagement. I would just add a couple of things to say that in the survey analysis, which you'll hear a little bit about as we get to talking about the housing and neighborhoods, we also conducted an analysis that isolated the responses from renters and from those aged 18 to 35, because of those are groups that we don't often hear from in the quantity that we do from some other groups. And we really wanted to hear what the concerns of those groups were. And then also, we did spend, my colleague Michelle and I spent a whole day in Grand Blanc High School, first time since I graduated from there. And we spent the day with 5 government classes, and we had a really terrific time in which we did 2 exercises. The first was that we asked them to basically give the township a grade on a variety of things, from making sure everybody can get around, to managing the environment, to ensuring that everybody has a home. And then we just threw them the hardest real world planning problems that we have, the trade-offs that we have to make every day. Our biggest findings from them were a kind of unshakable interest in preserving the environment that was very strong, and also a strong desire for vibrant walkable places, which, teenagers are always looking for something to do. So, but that, comported very well with the findings for everybody's looking for something to do, right? So that's a little summary of the community engagement. And then, one slide too far. And then we'll just launch right into the land use and natural features. So I'm sorry to do this. I think for a large part, I'm going to end up reading from these slides, and then I have some additional comments. I don't generally like slides that are quite so texty like this, but I wanted this slideshow to kind of serve as a reference going forward. So it kind of is what it is. Findings. Residential land use is the biggest in the township. It covers almost 2/3 of the township. And let me just say a word about the way this is structured. As we said, we leaned hard on the community engagement here. So I always say that all planning is kind of data plus preference equals your plan. And so it was our job as the consultants to bring the data and to, kind of add the best planning practices to them, but that only gets you so far. Then you need to understand how to mold that into what you're going to do next. So to make that connection as clear as possible, this is the way that the implementation section of the plan is structured. A summary of what we found, and right next to it, a summary of the community, of what the community said and how we were brought to these conclusions. So I just brought that right here. So what did folks say about residential land use? One thing that we found was that protecting that environment is important. So things like noise regulations and lighting standards were high priorities for our residents, and so then will be high priorities as we guide development. Several opportunities exist for future industrial and commercial reuse and redevelopment, and a big finding was that 2/3, we asked the question directly: do you want to see less development? Do you want to see about the same amount of development? Do you want to see more development in the township? 2/3 of people said more. We would like to plan for more growth and development here. Good finding, good to know. We also asked about, a variety of priorities for protection and preservation. Water quality, which came up as a strong priority for protection. And so we, looked deeply into the way impervious surfaces affect watershed health, and what we would do with that is prioritize strategies for collecting stormwater on site. And actually the township already has examples of excellent development that really moves forward this concept in a way that I don't see in very many places. Heritage Park its combination of using stormwater management as an amenity, a feature, and being incorporated into the development is something that we've used as an example in other communities well before even this project. So having that right in our township shows us an obviously viable way forward. Natural features is kind of the other side of the development coin, and access to nature and green space was highly important. So that was on the community survey, which we had, as Mark said, 700 responses to. We asked in that survey, we asked a variety of questions. So you'll see this phrase sometimes about the same thing. We would ask how important it was to the survey takers, and then on the same very line, we would say, and how is your satisfaction with it? So if it was, both high satisfaction and high importance, great, we're doing a good job, keep it up. But if there was a gap there, then that's where we know we would want to kind of lean in and pay some more attention. So access to nature and green space was one of the ones that scored as highly important, but the satisfaction was lower to neutral. So that's an opportunity for us, right? As I said before, the students firmly supported environmental protection, and we kind of pushed them on that because they were so strong on it. We would ask them questions, that would sort of directly compare it with strong economic incentives. Even so, they were very in favor of it. 95% of them said that, 95%, that's a big, out of 100 students, said that government is responsible for protecting our natural environment, and they gave the township a B- as a grade for managing our natural resources. So what can we do about that? Well, the township already has an excellent high tree canopy coverage, which sets us up for increased resiliency from both precipitation and temperature increases, as well as increasing development value, both residential and commercial. And we kind of came away with the sense that preserving and increasing natural features is key to both retaining the attractive natural character of Grand Blanc Township, in addition to increasing these values as development continues. So we'll really want to keep that in mind. I would say just one sort of brief thing about the strong finding from the students. The way they talked about development and preservation, it had a different tenor than we often hear from adults. And I think, some of that is due to lack of experience with the associated trade-offs. I think, it's easier to like trees when you don't have to do the math on the other side. But I would not discount entirely this shift on that grounds. And I would say that part of the reason that we ask high school students that we, go into the community and spend time in high schools and find teachers to partner with is our sense that master planning is a long game. And so these are folks who, by the time, if you're looking out at it over a 25-year horizon, by the time, this plan has reached the end of its, sort of the end of its useful horizon, we'll be updating it before then, but they will be in charge. So it does us some good to understand now what our citizens of the future are thinking and heading toward. Services, facilities, and assets. So the kind of lay of the land is that almost all parcels in the township have access to public sanitary water and sewer lines. Some still remain on private septic and water systems, although they are largely concentrated in the southwestern portion of the township. The water system is perfectly capable of handling the current demand, has room for expansion. And among the other things under the township's purview here are 2 parks, an active library, and a strong senior center. I'd like to call out here that survey respondents were really satisfied with most township services. They, in particular, called out fire protection, law enforcement, trash collection, park and trail maintenance. And I will say we work in a lot of communities. Residents do not always speak so highly of the services that they receive in the professional manner and efficient way in which they're delivered. So I would really commend the township for that. Government responsiveness was highly important, and satisfaction was also quite high. So demonstrating that. And then an interesting finding was over 3/4 of respondents want park and recreation expansion. And sometimes we take the extra step to ask, is that true even if you're going to pay for it? So the options there were, yes, even if taxes and fees increase, yes, but only if I don't have to pay for it, and then no. And so here's one where, again, over 75% said, yes, we want more park and recreation, yes, we're willing to pay for it. And now this survey was conducted all the way last year before the recent changes in the Park and Rec situation. So I think this is going to be highly relevant information for the township, and especially timely. we also take a look at assets. So the services and facilities are things that are under the township's control. And the feedback here is, sort of directly usable to us. But we also take a look at community assets, which are important to our, our health, our prosperity, our continued, good fortune, but they're not directly under our control. So we don't ask a whole lot of survey questions about that because one thing that is very important to me in administering community engagement is that I don't ask for direction on things that I then can't deliver on. Like that, to me, is not a good way to build trust. So there's not a whole lot of community feedback here, but as the professional planners and the folks who are responsible for kind of making these decisions, we do take a look at it. So worth mentioning are the high performing school system, because it's a land use draw. Again, we don't have any control over it, but we do have partnership. The Ascension Genesis Regional Medical Center, a regional asset, provides medical services and employment opportunities. Not in our control, although we did have representation on our steering committee. And excellent high-speed broadband access, which we're also in the process of upgrading to 5G. And that is a real draw, both for businesses who wish to locate here and also for people who work that way, who work remotely, which is so many of us now. Housing in neighborhoods. So the housing stock in the township is predominantly single-family residences, and most of the housing units were constructed after 1970. You can see from this residential structures the year built map that the basic pattern is that as distance increases from the city of Flint, housing is newer and density decreases. And that southwest corner, so then 68% of the township own their homes, and that's true for most census tracts, that they're majority home ownerships, except in that southwest corner, where it's technically majority renter occupied, but that is probably interacting with the fact that in that corner there's also large lot development. So by land area, it is still probably more under single owner control than it is renters. What did we hear from the community? It's important to note that 90% of survey respondents live in single family residences, as opposed to the 68% of the township. And this is true almost all the time. As I said, it's hard to reach renters. When we sent out our survey postcards, we specifically chose to use voter rolls rather than ownership data to try and capture more, but it is just not a demographic that you are able to often get really robust community engagement data from, which is why we did the additional analysis to take a good look at what we did get and try to draw our conclusions from it. The survey takers overall said that the quality of housing was very important and that residents were satisfied with the current quality of housing. And they noted that variety and affordability of housing formats were also important, but were generally neutral on the level of satisfaction with those. So even with this kind of overrepresentation of people who currently own a home in the township, they would have preferred a better variety of housing formats and a little more affordability. Well, everybody would like housing to be a little more affordable. We're going to talk some more about the housing formats. So we found a distinct need for these missing middle housing formats. So in all of America, we have basically really concentrated on two housing types: the kind of single family detached home and the at least mid-rise, if not high-rise concentrated apartment buildings, basically. But there's a whole range of different housing types in the middle that serve a variety of household types, probably better than the two options on either side. So this is a nationwide conversation that's going on, and one that is clearly relevant here in Grand Blanc also. Tech Village presents a prime opportunity for them. New construction sort of offers more flexibility in that way. And just some findings from our research. The Housing and Transportation Index, which is put out by the Center for Neighborhood Technology, I will call them a think tank in Chicago. They have a wonderful tool that combines not just housing affordability, but sort of in a direct response to the idea of drive till you qualify. It combines your housing affordability with your transportation costs. And so, yes, it may be that you will qualify for a different mortgage if you live further away from say, your employment or shopping options or everything else you need in life, but what is that actually going to do to your household budget? So, the standard is that you should spend no more than, say, a third of your income on housing. Well, when you factor in transportation costs, which the Center for Neighborhood Technology says should be about 15% of your budget, so for a combined expenditure of about 50%, we're finding that township households spend 65% of their average budget on those two items. So there's some opportunity to address affordability in that way too. From our housing analysis, we saw that the highest vacancy rates exist in the northwest portion of the township, and the Genesee County Neighborhood Stabilization Program has a target area in this corner of the township. Those vacancies do provide opportunities for redevelopment, and that redevelopment can be in different formats. And then finally, the community engagement found, as renters, as I said, are an underrepresented group in the survey, but those we did hear from had very low satisfaction with housing quality, variety, and affordability, which of course those things are linked. If you're not finding the housing format that you're looking for and you are having difficulty affording what's available, then chances are good that what you're ending up in is housing that is not of the quality that you might prefer. We asked specific questions about various types of housing, and those types were rental housing, assisted living, workforce housing, affordable housing, and senior citizen housing. We said, does the township have too much of these? Does it have just the right amount? Does it have not enough? Renters and those under the age of 35 said we don't have enough of any of those kinds of housing, including senior housing, which I thought was interesting. Students, we asked them, I said we gave them all the hardest problems that we had, and one of them was, what kind of housing are we going to build? Are we going to build outside of the established communities that we have, and basically greenfield development on new land, and have larger lots and subdivision homes, basically, which everybody in the township is of course familiar with? Or would you prefer to build sort of more denser housing that is closer to and that sort of reuses land within the community? They were not really supportive of the subdivision homes on undeveloped land. They really wanted to see more dense housing types, and without knowing the technical term for it, they went so far as to describe mixed-use development. Well, couldn't it be right next to the store? I mean, could we have it, in the downtown? That kind of thing, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'll also just say one word about renters. They're sometimes seen as a liability, and that makes a certain amount of sense because homeownership is sort of a bargain that we make with folks that you will take care of this one area of the township, and it will be, under your control and your responsibility, in a way that's not true with a landlord, especially one who may not live in the area. I think, though, that this view in general needs to at least adapt a bit if we want any kind of younger population in our community. That's not really younger folks have more reason to wish to be more mobile. Upwardly mobile professionals are an excellent example of folks who it is not the right incentive for them to buy a home and to sort of tie themselves to maintaining a square of our township. So if we want those folks in our community, then I think we may need to find a way to make, not in all cases, but in some cases, to really make rentership attractive, not just to them, but also to us. Sorry, there's a little lag on this and I can never tell if I clicked it or not. Okay, centers and focus areas. So I have the same map for the next 3 slides here, and I hope you can kind of see it. These are the areas of concentrated activity within the township. They're really, they're the face of the township. They're the places that you think of, the places that you have occasion to go, that meet your needs, that draw in our guests and visitors, and are often our employment hubs also. So we took the approach, the transform, enhance, preserve approach to these centers. We identified the ones that are not quite functioning as intended, either because they have not yet fully developed, or because they're, have kind of completed their last development cycle and are now in need of redevelopment. And we'll start with those. So the two transformative areas were, as I called out earlier, North Grand Blanc Township, which is defined as basically from the point north, particularly again on South Saginaw Street, but also on Door Highway. And overall, we had a whole section of the survey that was devoted to asking specific questions about that. What do you want to see in terms of traffic? What do you want to see in terms of building materials? What do you want to see in terms of how that development looks? What do you want to see in terms of what there is to do there? And overall, people really wanted to see something new in the township. They wanted traditional style development as opposed to conventional styles. So when I say conventional style commercial development, you would think of, say, a small strip mall, an attractive small strip mall, but one nonetheless that has parking in the front and that, you know, is one story, is set back, does not necessarily have any pedestrian amenities. When I say traditional style development, I mean something that has 2 or 3 stories. We generally think of it as being made of more durable materials, but that's not necessarily true. That sits closer to the road and is accessible, say, by sidewalk. And that was a strong preference. I mean, that came through with, and I don't have that number in front of me now, but I want to say it was well over 60% of folks really preferred that development style. So the vision for North Grand Blanc Township, and there was a corridor study done on it as recently as 2008 that really provided a lot of excellent starting information that will be incorporated into this plan coming forward. The vision is an attractive gateway and a commercial center serving the northern portion of the township. And it can also capitalize on the future Iron Bell Trail, which we'll talk more about in the circulation and corridors section, but that is envisioned to basically come up right south of the point and then continue along the Thread Creek and Railroad right of way. The other area was the recently created DDA district in the south. So that's, you know, encompasses the township's current major commercial, well, I won't call it a commercial center, but major employment center that has, you know, the healthcare park down there, but it also contains a considerable amount of vacant land that is well planned. It has, the DDA plan goes into great detail about provisions for infrastructure. Now in the future, there is a detailed vision for the kind of development that should occur there. It is basically ready to go. It has an established vision and framework in place for it. And then finally, I would just say that the students were so strongly drawn to dense commercial development patterns that they said ultimately they really preferred improvements to the city of Grand Blanc's downtown over the creation of brand new centers in the township. Now, this is where we don't have to, you know, do everything that the students say, but that preference or that strength of preference can inform the development areas planned for, say, for the village mixed use. In addition to presenting opportunities for collaboration with the city of Grand Blanc. I mean, you know, a city and a township traditionally do have that kind of relationship where there's sort of, you know, the concentrated, vibrant activity often takes place inside the city limits. And then kind of the quieter, the bedroom aspect of it happens in the township. And that's an excellent relationship that, you know, we have here and that can continue to be supported. There's nothing wrong with that. So next on the centers and focus areas, we have the enhance ones. And those are what a member of the steering committee called Hollywood, which is the theater, partly developed theater complex on Holly Road. And I just thought that was tremendous. And I hope that that sticks. The Fenton Hill intersection and then Heritage Park. Those are all commercial nodes that presently offer shopping, dining, entertainment, services, both to residents and visitors. I mean, these are, you know, these are centers as they're supposed to be. Highest priorities for development, as identified by this survey, were restaurants, entertainment, and locally owned retail. 3/4 of the survey respondents said that additional neighborhood shopping establishments and restaurants would improve their quality of life. Sometimes there's a concern there that that sort of can dilute the impact of the centers. You know, if you can get a snack right up the street, maybe you don't have to drive down to the Fenton Hill intersection, for example. I think that's less true. You're going to get tired of the restaurant down the street and you're still going to need to go to one of the centers. But it is worth noting right now that those particular priorities, the restaurants, entertainments, and locally owned retail, are just so endangered by COVID right now. And obviously that's not going to go on forever. This master plan covers 5 to 25 years, but fluctuations in the built environment can go on for a long time and have, sort of long lasting effects. So I think that's worth thinking about and keeping in mind and trying to find ways to support that with the understanding that we have the community's backing. The Industrial Park Center, which is right next to Heritage Park, serves as an employment hub for the township, as well as people outside of the township. So it's a bit of a draw. And each of these centers, as we've looked through them, as I said, they're functioning as they intended. Efforts go to maintaining and improving them. And they would benefit from landscaping, improving pedestrian bicycling amenities and the connections, and just ensuring that the visual elements, like signs and lighting, continue to have a consistent look. And then finally, we did ask some questions about job opportunities and entrepreneurial support. So the job opportunities were very important to survey takers. Entrepreneurial support has got medium important, and then current satisfaction with both is neutral. So that's, information to have when supporting our employment centers. And then moving on to preserve the areas that we wish to preserve. And this, honestly, to be perfectly frank, did not emerge as a major focus of this plan. My theory is that because much of the community in the built environment is in fact pretty new, especially on the development scale. As we said earlier, most of the housing has been built just since 1970. So technically, only this year does that even qualify, meet the 50-year threshold for being historic whatsoever. But what that means, though, is that we're kind of still in the forward-looking stage. And what we need to keep in mind is that today's developments are tomorrow's historic resources. So when we talked about North Grand Blanc, some strong support emerged for requiring durable building materials. Well, that's an expensive requirement, and we hear about it from developers. And so it's worth keeping in mind that there's more at stake than just than just today's basically development decision. We did note that area number 7 right there, the Grand Blanc Township Historic Resource Survey, identified the Perry Settlement area as an area to preserve with a historic designation, although I do not believe there was significant support for, say, a historic district ordinance that would specifically guide development. The Historic Commission developed a strategic plan in 2018 that established the vision and plan for the future of the site. It's basically just the job of this plan to acknowledge that and to support it. And then finally, circulation and corridors. So we'll start with everything but the non-motorized circulation. Primarily, we get around via the roads. There are several key interstates that get us to other regions and other states. Major arterials within the township, that's what's on the map there, serve us locally. I did want to note that the corridor studies, with the exception of the 2008 one, most of them were done sort of in the 1990 to very early 2000s era. And by and large, those have been implemented. So it's specifically stated in the plan that those have been completed to the extent that they will, and that whatever remains has been incorporated in specific suggestions, but that we don't so much need to reference those plans going forward, which is really commendable. Nice work, Planning Commission, for implementing a plan that you have to the extent that you feel like you can check it off. I was telling Mark when we talked about this, he said, what is the process for completing a plan? I said, I don't know that I've heard of anybody who did it. So the process is what we make it. We do mention regional transportation, access to air, rail, and bus transportation amenities. Those are important for economic development. A variety of industries need a variety of circulation resources, and so having this array is one thing that positions us well for economic prosperity. And then, of course, we're served by the Flint Mass Transportation Authority, and there are opportunities for the township to partner with the MTA to both improve access and expand services. And what that would look like is actually a lot like non-motorized transportation amenities, because that is what connects the homes and businesses to the roadway system. It's the kind of last mile. There's not very much in the community column here because, again, this is not something that we have fine-grained control of all the time. At the car scale, survey respondents place a high importance on road quality with low current satisfaction. I think across the state of Michigan, we can nod our heads vigorously with that state of affairs. But because the roads generally have such varied ownership and projects are long-term and they're very cost-driven and they have a lot of moving parts that are not under our direct control, we again did not particularly go to the residents to ask them for opinions that we are unable to even really think that we're going to carry out. But now we get to what's maybe the heart of the matter. As I said, this is an area, non-motorized transportation, where I think we can expect to see this plan really influencing the built environment. So non-motorized infrastructure came up as crucial. The survey revealed this overwhelming desire for trails and pathways and sidewalks. And again, we asked them, even if your taxes and fees increase, and the answer was yes, even if my taxes and fees increase. We have a really enviable array of circumstances regarding these initiatives. So there is some existing trail infrastructure. We already have the bike path, the Bicentennial Park Trail, and the Genesis Regional Medical Center trails are nice, although they're not as connected as we would like them to be to sort of make up part of the network. But there's also ongoing work on the ground. There's the Grand Blanc Grade Group, which I think was fairly recently formed, but having citizens who have come together on their own initiative to address a planning issue is a tremendous resource. We have the Iron Bell proposed route. That is this thick purple line. That's the proposed route. I said it was on another map, and that's this one. So that's a statewide bicycle trail. I mean, it's called Iron Bell because it goes from Belle Isle by Detroit to Ironwood, almost to Wisconsin. And so it is expected to be a draw throughout the state and therefore presents economic development opportunities. In our future land use planning, we would be wise to make and promote and maintain a trailhead there. And just overall, community benefits. This is one thing that like sort of has multiple teams pulling on it. So benefits include both better public health and increased property values with this kind of investment. Back to the survey results, biking and walking trails had really high importance and current satisfaction with the amenities is low. So like I said, signaling an opportunity there. The same findings when we asked about transportation choice in general without specifically identifying biking and walking trails, high interest, low satisfaction. The students, we asked them all about sidewalks. So that was one of our questions that we asked. And they, in all 5 classes, I don't think a single one did not vote that all housing development should have sidewalks. And again, these are not, trade-offs that they have to make in the real world yet, but they didn't care whether the developer paid for it or the taxes did. They were like, listen, this is a thing that needs to happen. Most of them said that they would walk more if they had a safer option in the road. And they gave the township a C grade for making sure that everyone can get around. I like asking students about this because many of them are still pre-car or brand new car. They have a much closer sense of what a limitation on mobility it is if you do not have access to a personal vehicle and the road. So the last thing, I would say about this is that it's a golden moment when everyone is on the same page here. So at a minimum, requiring sidewalks at every possible opportunity in new development is basically unanimous across the board, from everybody I've talked to, from the steering committee to the students, like all the way across the board. Yes, let's do that is what I'm hearing. As an investment priority, it's highly visible, it's community supportive, it has multiple measurable benefits. If I was going to hang my hat on a signature initiative, this kind of cohort of planners, by which I mean not just Mark, not just the Planning Commission, but like everybody who's coming together to make this community a better place, this would probably be it. We'll talk a little bit about future land use. Every master plan has a new future land use map. This one recommends very few major changes. The last one was adopted in 2013, and that incorporated the major change of the DDA district. And so we really were kind of not focused on making any sweeping alterations to the land use, but really on what areas can we improve and how. So talking about housing, options to increase density gently and expand housing choice that were proposed included allowing 4 dwelling units per acre everywhere except for down here in this rural estate that is not served by sewer and water. Currently, large swaths of the township permit no more than 2 dwelling units per acre. It's worth noting that that change will generally apply to new development only and few select redevelopment parcels in existing neighborhoods. Increasing density is not so much something that happens to existing neighborhoods in a swift fashion because they are already built. This is more about how we go forward. Also along that vein, we recommend encouraging missing middle housing between 4 and 10 dwelling units per acre. So kind of really making the point that not everything has to be in the format of a single family detached home at those densities. That there are, again, options for things that don't look like anything we traditionally see, such as, bungalow courts or, maybe a neighborhood of duplexes or just things that we don't traditionally see a whole lot of, but that would really address some variety and affordability concerns. Moving on to the commercial sector, we propose folding office districts into neighborhood commercial. In general, my planning opinion is that the office land use category is really restrictive. It is a single use. This has only been bolstered by the fact that office complexes are at this point pretty deserted. And I don't know, that's one thing that I don't know how it's going to bounce back. People are going to go to restaurants and bars just as soon as it is safely possible, but I don't know that that's true for offices. So there's something that we may be facing as a longer term effect here, but even if we weren't, regardless of that, one thing about offices is that they really benefit from the proximity of commercial development. So the commercial development gets to have the folks in the offices stop by for lunch and pick up whatever, the quart of milk that they need on the way home, and sometimes co-locate in buildings with them. That's a good use for a second story. And the office workers benefit from that also. So now you don't have to bring your lunch every single day or get in the car and drive somewhere and make sure that you have enough time for that. You can just run out and grab a sandwich. You don't have to, but you can get that quart of milk. So this relationship to me is very complementary, and that sort of should be encouraged. And then finally, one thing that we have done down here is sorry about that. There you go. Acknowledge that the Dordt Highway extension will change the character of that area. So 2 things there. We should certainly adopt development standards that ensure that the development that we get there is of the type and quality that we want. And then second, I think it will make some sense to accommodate some additional commercial uses in an area where there presently aren't any. The extension itself is its own disruption. So this is less a concern of us coming in and disrupting and more kind of making the existing disruption work for us. And then finally, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the adoption process. This is all, as Mark said, laid out in the good old Planning Enabling Act and detailed by state statute. So the steering committee has already written the plan, and then the township departments have reviewed it. And now we are at today's meeting where it is being presented to the Planning Commission as a whole. The Planning Commission's action, which may not take place today, but that now we're getting into what's prescribed by law. Their action is to request the township board to distribute the plan, and that signals their satisfaction with it and willingness to release it to the community. The township board then will pass a resolution or a motion authorizing the plan for distribution. That's the township board's kind of touch and indication of satisfaction with it. And then we go into this mandatory 63-day review period, where there are some entities that we are required to send a copy of the plan to by law. Those include our neighboring communities, the state, utility companies. There's a list of folks that are spelled out right in the act that we are required to notify of the contents of our plan. And then we also make it available for public review and inspection, starting as we are today. So there will, as Mark said, during that 63-day period be a community engagement event where we bring a similar summary, probably a little different in format, to the community at large and receive feedback. At the completion of that 63-day process, Then the plan comes back to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. That is where the public hearing is held. It's the Planning Commission's responsibility. And then the Planning Commission takes its final action on the plan. So that, in this case, will be a recommendation to the Township Board to adopt. The state also gives the option, if the community is so set up, the Planning Commission could be the final word on the plan, but that's not the case here. So here, the Planning Commission will make a recommendation to adopt, and then the Township Board will do the final adopting of the plan. And that is all that I have. I'm ready for questions, and I see that we have one already from Mr. Yancho. I think you're unmuted.
Hello,
Hi.
this is Mike Yancho. Do you have me on board?
Yes.
If I was to understand you correctly, this is the last opportunity that the Planning Commission has to weigh in on the proposed draft amendment.
Well, I mean, certainly tonight is not the last opportunity. This is the time in which I think it should receive the Planning Commission's most detailed attention. So, you know, this would be the time that we should take as many meetings as it takes to address any concern that you have in the master plan and to ensure that it says everything that you want it to say before we ask it to go to the public. But there will also be another opportunity to make whatever changes. I mean, whatever we hear from the public, from the community, from the agencies, like there is an opportunity to incorporate that in the plan. And at the same time, if the Planning Commission has final changes, then that's fair game also.
So the Township Planning Commission doesn't have an approval process before this draft goes before the Township Board.
Well, you will vote twice on this plan. You will vote once in this process. Again, I would not think tonight, but once in this series right now, you will vote to send it to the Township Board for distribution. And then after, at the public hearing, you will vote again to recommend adoption to the Township Board.
Okay. I have one question that I have many, but I'd like to bring one up tonight. It regards the residential density.
Yes.
Regarding the census.
Okay.
And so in tract 1102, the census and the report suggests that there is only 46% of home ownership. Am I correct?
Well, I do not have that figure in front of me right now, but it may be that you're referring to the southwest corner, which, yes, there was one tract that was identified as majority renter occupied, which, you know, would be the reverse of what you just said. And I think that that is true, but I think that part of that is influenced by the fact that that tract, most of it is taken up by the large lot minimum 1 acre development. So I don't have that analysis, like we haven't even done that analysis, but I suspect that most of the land area is in fact under, you know, it is in fact these large parcels, and then that there are a development and maybe two of that is primarily or maybe entirely renter occupied. So if you're just counting the people, which is what the census does, many more of them are renters. But if you were counting if you're taking a look at the land, then I think the majority of it is actually rural estate rather than renters.
Yeah, I think that's about 6 or 8 square miles of property of the township. And according to table XX, which every table is XX,
right?
Summary of neighborhood characteristics by census tract, 111.02 is 46% owner occupied, but it has over 50% renters. And at the same time, there are 1,332 rental units in just 2 rental properties that take up less than half of a square mile of that census tract.
That is
So
what,
I'm not sure that that's a valid use of statistics to recommend how that census tract or those properties might be master planned as MDM.
I don't think that we've recommended that the whole tract be master planned as MDM. We have strongly encouraged the preservation of the rural estate parcels, in part because it really represents the most undeveloped land in the township and supports the attractive rural character.
I'm sure you're correct that you didn't recommend it the whole thing, but you know, to recommend that different parcels in the, you know, in the middle of those tracts be changed might be considered spot zoning.
Sure, absolutely, which I'm not in favor of whatsoever. I just think that that's just kind of a quirk of the statistics, and we didn't draw any conclusions or make any recommendations based on that, you know, that sort of oddity. But it is true, and so we reported it as it exists.
So I'm glad to hear that we will have opportunities to weigh in later on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The draft proposal before it goes to the board. Is that correct?
Yes. So there's no reason. This should absolutely be a document that the whole planning commission is comfortable sending to the board. And that's the process that we're starting right now. Like, I fully recognize that most of you did not lay eyes on this plan before I sent it over a couple of weeks ago. And so it may be far from your expectations. I hope not. But certainly in certain areas, I would expect robust feedback.
So much of it is, I don't have problems with, 99 or 95% of it, but I know you've had a lot of work, you've done a lot of work, but I just want to make sure of the process that we will have opportunities to weigh in and express our concerns and have it evaluated by the total planning commission before it goes before the township board.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Leah.
Sure. Yes, Mark?
If I could, I hope I can clarify something. It seems to me that it may be a little bit misunderstood. The process here will remain open for changes really until the very end. I mean, we may get feedback from here until whenever that collectively we decide we need to make some modifications. But what I want to be clear to everybody about is the process of this going to the board is really just the commission sending it to the board and asking them, as Leah said, to allow the distribution to the outside agencies and to begin the public hearing process. It's not for the adoption. The planning commission, I don't believe that the board is the adopting body in Grand Blanc Township. Dan, you were there before. And Leah, we'll have to work on that because I don't recall that it went to the board before. I think if you look at all the other, I don't recall seeing anything from the board on any of the other plans, resolutions, but we'll have to check all that out.
Yeah, I was surprised when I heard Leah say that because that wasn't what how I had remembered it either.
That's funny. I only ever get that information right from the community, so I must have just heard yes as no. My apologies.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be clear about, I don't believe it does that. That's kind of important, but all we're doing at this stage is taking it to the board and letting them, giving us authorization. It's a part of the process that we would have to do.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Mark. what I wanted to be sure of is that I didn't bring any of my concerns, you know, after the draft was presented to the township board or to the public. I wanted to bring my concerns up before that happened. So, so that I wasn't going to muddy the waters.
Right,
We want your input.
absolutely. Tonight would be great, but, you know, there's going to be meetings after this. We went through those earlier. Next one will be in September. If we need to have another one between then and now, we could potentially. So we're wide open to making sure that this gets vetted in a way that everybody's very, very comfortable with.
So what's the avenue for presenting?
Well, you gotta read it, okay? I mean, I'm going to say
Oh, I
that.
did.
Okay, that's good, but you
I've
have
got
to read it.
underlined and circled and question mark.
And if,
Started.
you know, if you would take the time and, you know, you could put a note on those pages that you have comments on, get that to us, write up a series of comments if you want. If you needed to come in and sit down and just talk about it, we could do it that way. Mike, there's a number of ways. Plus, because then what we would be doing is we would then need to share your comments with everybody. We're not going to fold your comments in and then you know, say here it is. We would need to share that and get concurrence that folks are in agreement with any of these adjustments or comments being added, or there may simply need to be additional dialogue to work details of those comments out, and the opportunity will exist. So we don't want to wait until after the 63-day review period for the Planning Commission to get comments, but for sure, between now and the time that the document goes out for that 63-day review, and of course during that time period, there'll be the opportunity for comments. I would expect during the community engagement exercises that we'll have comments that will come in that we may very well need to get back together and discuss. Here's what came up. Here are some of the conclusions. You know, and here's how we're intending to address that. And then we would need concurrence from the commission that that's an appropriate way to address it, or if it needed to be addressed at all. So there will be those opportunities. And, you know, we start to, you know, kind of cobble pieces together, but we make sure that once it's complete, there'll still be some opportunity for adding on. But once that is complete, you know, everybody's going to be comfortable with that. There shouldn't be any real comments left for people to make. Otherwise, we wouldn't be taking it for final approval.
So I want to make sure that all of us on the Planning Commission are in step. There's one thing that I would like to request of Leah, and that is that the slideshow was great, but if you're going to try and follow along with your own online or paper copies or whatever it is, that it'd be great for that slideshow to show the page number of what she's referring to.
Yeah.
So that we can you know, make sure that we're in step with what you're explaining to us.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a darn good idea.
So
Making a note.
that's all. That's all I got.
Vince, I see your hand up.
Yes, I have a question, 2 comments, and then some action items. First off, in the master plan, under the community vision, you know, there are blank pages and it says, see the separate spreadsheet.
Yes.
Is that the spreadsheet that has all the other action items on it?
Yes, it is.
And the same thing then applies under the action plan, where you'll take that spreadsheet and divvy it up into the 5 areas.
Yep, that's correct. And the reason that it was presented that way is because in the master plan, we envision it being shown in 2 different ways, once by subject and then once by kind of like who's going to take it on. And so in order to make sure that we did not put a change one place and not in another place, we thought we will just, at this point, until we have the contents of that spreadsheet nailed down, leave it in one place and then distribute it throughout the plan.
Okay, my second comment is, my first comment, I guess, page 81 on the bike paths.
Okay.
I live on McCandless Road, but would strongly recommend we add McCandless Road to the bike path, a lane, right, not the path, but the lane on the roads, because there are bikers going up and down McCandless constantly. So comment.
Okay, so
Second
you're
comment.
recommending a bike path, a bike lane.
No, not a path. This is the bike lane on the
Right.
highway, on the roads.
Add a,
Talk about Baldwin Road, you talk about Cook Road, and there's one other. And I'm just recommending that the Planning Commission, we add McCandless Road.
okay,
We'll have more discussion on that in one of our meetings.
sure. But I'll record it as a comment so that we have it for that
My other
discussion.
comment, and although I know you said you hope it sticks, I really don't think Hollywood area is going to be very clear to a lot of people.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't know what it was until you mentioned the theater section earlier this evening. But we should entertain a different kind of area because, you know, Fenton Hill Road, that's pretty clear. And the other parts, Saginaw Road, that's part clear, but Hollywood, I'm not sure. But we'll talk more about that.
Sure.
I agree
My
with
last-
you.
Sure.
My action items, and I had a call into you yesterday, Leah, and to you, Mark, on Tuesday, but I have 12 recommended changes, grammatical changes, and or changes that that should be made prior to it going any other place. And I would be happy to stay on Zoom after the meeting to go through those with you.
Sure. Or if
And
it is
my-
any easier for you to scan the pages where you've notated them or to send where you have that written down, we can do
Nope.
that too.
No, that's not very easy.
That's not easier? Okay, sure. Then
It's
that's
not
fine
easier,
too.
not for me, because my scanner doesn't work.
Oh, they're the worst.
So, I mean, I can go through it quickly. I
Sure.
have it identified page by page.
All right. I will
So
plan on that.
either later today or somebody call me, either way.
I will plan on that.
Okay? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vince, I support your change of the Hollywood Center. When I saw that, I thought it was a typo from some other
Yeah.
document. And then I started seeing it showing up more and more places. Well, they must have meant to have it in here, but it doesn't. It isn't something that we normally term that we use in the township.
Sure. It did come from the steering committee. I didn't make that one up, so I felt pretty good about championing it. But listen, it's not mine, so I'm happy to do whatever you'd like.
Leah, this is Dolores. I wrote up some comments
You
and
did.
sent them off to Mark, and he told me he forwarded them to you.
Yes, thank you.
Have you seen those?
Have.
Yeah, I want to just put a couple of them out for discussion or, consideration and maybe give people some things to think about, particularly on the future land use map. I mean, you mentioned, for example, that currently, obviously, we have separate districts for neighborhood, commercial, and office. My feeling is that, and my preference would be to maintain those as separate districts, for a couple reasons. One is, I mean, those are distinct uses, and office services tend to be more stable. They don't turn over as much. They tend to have, plus they're white collar jobs, sometimes higher income, higher skill type jobs. And they don't generate a lot of traffic. I mean, you have employees that come in the morning and leave in the evening. Neighborhood commercial is just quite a bit different use, generates a lot of in and out of traffic the whole, across the day. So they can be adjacent districts, but I don't particularly see any advantage in, having offices next to, little food shops, fast food shops, or whatever. So that's just a comment, something to maybe generate some discussion. The other thing is we have two zoning districts that have never been developed, really. They're not in the zoning ordinance, but they've been in the future land use map. And that's the village mixed use and flexible development, which I never quite understood, but occurred to me that if you want to do some mixed uses, or you want to have, I don't know, it's come up from time to time, like these live-work units where you have retail on the first floor and then you have, you know, living units above. You can do that with, I think, with our PUD option. So I just threw out a suggestion that maybe we just ought to, you know, just eliminate those two uses, village mixed use and flexible development. Again, just something for people to consider. The other comment I think that I sent off to you had to do with the residential districts. First of all, on the sidewalks, I absolutely think sidewalks should be required in new developments. And in the plan, you said whenever possible. I don't favor giving people an out to, you know, try to argue that it's not possible. I can't imagine a scenario where you're putting in a new development and you know, that it wouldn't be possible to have sidewalks. And it seems to be a pretty general consensus that people like subdivisions with sidewalks. And I think it increases the value, you know, property values. I love streetlights too. I love to see sidewalks and streetlights in all subdivisions. So that's a comment. And another, just, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I was concerned that with the multi-family districts, I think you were proposing medium and high density categories, but there would be no cap on the density in the high density category. And I think about that. I'm not sure we will. Currently, I think we have a maximum of, oh no, I forgot what it was.
I think it's 20.
20, yeah. And I don't see any reason to let people, you know, put in a multi-family project that would exceed the 20 units per acre. I mean, that's kind of inconsistent with the township. I mean, we don't, you know, we don't have a concentrated downtown area where people want to live in, you know, 10-story high rises. So anyway, just wanted to put those out. Oh, and then the other, just another other comment on the single family residential, that, I mean, currently in our, you know, single family residential districts, all the units have to be detached. You can't have attached units in the single family residential district. And it wasn't clear to me whether that was going to remain, or that was your intention to keep that limit on that district, as opposed to allowing, you know, possible some attached units in the single family residential. And again, I kind of put that out there too, because that was an issue that came up when we were had that development on Grand Blanc Road. It's Banbury Commons, but I think the sign says Redwoods. It was residentially zoned, and because they came in with a open space, was it, or PUD, we allowed them to have 100% attached units, and it created a lot of controversy. So anyway, those are some issues I just wanted to kind of get out there so people can think about them.
Sure.
In other comments, maybe not right now, because, you know, we have some time constraints.
Sure.
Dolores, I want to make a couple of comments. First, appreciate you for going through in detail and making those comments. I fully support your position on the sidewalks. I'm of the same mind that I think those should be required in new developments. I agree with that. I guess it's a question maybe for Leah and the rest of the Planning Commission. When you're asking the question about the single family residential, have we, or would we consider allowing duplexes on a single lot? You know, I'm just thinking of like Ann Arbor and that kind of, you see that quite often. I don't know.
I will say that I pushed hard on this question, and it's partly because I live in a duplex in a single family neighborhood. We have them sprinkled throughout our neighborhood. So my lived experience is that this is, that this is a perfectly effective way of increasing density. The steering committee was not in favor of it. They were not in favor of it even retaining the overall density. So saying, it is still 2 or 4 dwelling units per acre. It's just that they're attached. And the answer was still no. So that's what came out of the steering committee and is eligible for debate here at the Planning Commission level.
Yep. And then, Dolores, you mentioned PUD. Don't we have, isn't there a minimum parcel size required for PUD?
I think we
reduced the size of it recently, but I think
yeah, that was my thought. I remember we reduced it. I don't actually remember what we reduced it to, but it was probably something we should take a look at.
I'd like to add just a comment to that, and whichever way you wish to conduct this business is the townships, and we'll write it up that way. The benefit to having this mixed-use district by right is that it makes it easier for the developer. So a PUD process is a bit cumbersome. It takes longer. There are additional approvals, and so if we know that that type is desirable in certain places, then by allowing it by right, we make it easier and more likely to happen. But again, but it is a less controlled kind of process than the PUD because you don't have the negotiations, and it is also acceptable to wish to do it the other way.
And I guess instead of combining neighborhood commercial with office, does it, we really don't have this mixed use. Does office become mixed use now? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, well, and that's not generally what I see. So generally office is considered a commercial use in the broadest sense, like, because, in the broadest sense, there's really only a few use types. They're residential, industrial, agricultural, and commercial. And so if kind of that's all that what you have on the palette, then office and basically what we're talking about is retail and restaurant, when we say neighborhood commercial and services. All I'm proposing is that we kind of lump those in instead of what, if I think about it, it seems a little strange carving off. We don't have a restaurant district. We don't have a retail district. Why we have these office districts? I think for the reasons that Dolores brought up, because they are slightly different. From my view, I agree that they're dissimilar, but I think that they are complementary. And so the fact that office uses are more stable is a benefit to the less stable commercial uses, especially if you have them in the same building. Now that building is better able to stay afloat in the times between restaurants, for example, and that can, sort of add to the three-legged stool nature of those districts. But there are office districts all over. That is, again, a perfectly acceptable way to do business.
I think maybe that's something we ought to address in our next planning commission, have a little more discussion about the office neighborhood. I haven't made up my mind yet on that one, but I think it's worth getting the input of the whole planning commission on that one.
I agree.
If I might, folks, one thing to keep in mind with this discussion on the office and neighborhood commercial is we're only discussing the master plan, which is an underlying land use category. It's not the zoning. The zoning is what really gets you down to the kind of office and the type of development. So I think that's an important thing to point out, because if you zone it office and you don't have commercial within that zoning, it's still allowed on the on that combined land use designation, but it's very specific from a zoning standpoint to only allowing whatever the office uses are in that particular zoning district. Now, I'm not suggesting we even limit it that way. I just want to make that point clear that that's how you regulate the uses. It's not through the land use plan. The land use plan, the idea here, I believe, is just to give us a broader, more flexibility with the kinds of uses that could go in any of these areas that would be designated with either of those two underlying land use categories, and then it would be a matter of placing the zoning designation on top of that to determine, the kind of uses, the densities, the other things that would come from your the zoning criteria.
Good point of distinction. Thanks. Vince, you had something?
Yeah, just as a follow-up to the previous discussions, the action plan has several zoning items on it. which I think will address some of the things that are being discussed right now. So when the commission goes through the action plans, we'll have much greater detail on some of those items and can modify them accordingly.
Yes.
Thanks.
I guess I've got a question maybe for Mark. When I went through and I read this section, it was talking about the corridor plans and a lot of that work's been implemented. I was kind of like, well, what are we going to do about it? I mean, have we any thought about saying, hey, these are done, we're taking it off the books? Because I think that by leaving it there, we're having some confusion.
Yeah, I think that was the idea, and that's what sort of raised it was, well, okay, we keep talking about, well, is this compliant with this plan or that plan? And we say, well, all of those provisions have been folded into the zoning ordinance already. So I think the point here is we could take some official action, you guys. The Planning Commission could adopt a resolution saying that, you know, you've effectively completed the necessary actions from these various corridor studies, and we could do a resolution indicating that they've been satisfied, or however, we could come up with some language to put that issue to rest. I'd love to be able to do that because I think it makes sense. Otherwise, it's out there forever. So
yeah, I agree. Let's put that on our to-do list.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually, Dan, I included that comment really in the written comments that I sent off. I really question whether we ought to just consider that, you know, those corridor plans have essentially been superseded to the extent that, you know, specific items in those corridor plans have not been included in a subsequent master plan. You know, they've basically been superseded. And if there are specific things in those corridor plans that for some reason we want to continue to focus on, we just include them in the, you know, in the new master plan and put them in the action plan, but phrase them not as, you know, implementing something from a prior corridor plan, just taking that idea and making it part of our new master plan.
I like it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Can I ask one clarifying question about that? Does this apply also? So to me, that everything that you said makes perfect sense for the Hill Road Corridor Plan and for the Holly Baldwin Saginaw Road Corridor Plan. But the 2008 Saginaw Street Corridor Plan that mostly deals with North Grand Blanc seems to me to still be more of an open item. Does that plan seem different to you?
Yes, I
Okay.
think so.
Just
I
make
think
sure
a lot of
I'm
that has not been implemented.
on the right page. All right, great. David, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand up. Oh, you're muted.
Hello, are you
Oh,
there?
we go.
Mr. Chair, may I be recognized, or are there others waiting to be to
No,
speak?
go ahead. Appreciate it.
I just had a few questions, if I could. It's understandable and praiseworthy that we ask questions of students and of renters because we want to get a proper mix of the people that reside in the township. But I have a question. What is the average length of residency of a renter in a rental unit in Grand Blanc Township, and maybe it tracks with rental units everywhere, but I'm just curious how transitory those renters are. Do you have statistics on that?
I think that I can do a little digging in the census. That seems like the sort of thing the census will provide. I do not know that we pulled that table specifically.
Okay, and a question: when we're talking about non-motorized trails, bike paths, and that, what are the most common funding sources for that? Is it general fund revenues? Is it a millage levy? Is it grants from state grant? What is the mix of funding sources? Because it's very easy and very quick for young people to say, well, we need to have non-motorized trails when they're students and may not be living in the area because they're going to school and going elsewhere for a period of time, or they're not paying taxes. And you were correct in mentioning that we have we have to balance concerns here, economic development being the chief one among them, and how those funding sources would impact our overall desire, which is to bring economic development and get the maximum value out of the commercially developable area that we have for our overall budgetary purposes. So what is the mix?
Yeah, well, I think mix is the operative word there, and a lot of it depends on who has control of the road. So federal funding often has, and of course I don't know what the current name of it is. It used to be the iced tea, and then so there's often a set aside in federal funding. So when roads are redone, a certain proportion of it can be allocated to non-motorized transportation. The state has similar programs. So those are two things to investigate for those types of roads. I do want to say that while it was true that the students also believed strongly in non-motorized transportation, that survey that we did, as I said, the respondents were 90% homeowners, and it came through very strongly in that one too. And we asked them even if taxes and fees increase. So I think that a millage may be on the table or some such thing for that. You also have an advocacy group, which does less funding, but which is really a way to put a face on a request, like a millage for that, a way to sort of gather grassroots support and to have some help in getting the word out and in understanding specifically which projects would be the most the most desirable, the kind of project that you could put out and be fairly well assured of the sort of enthusiastic response that would actually get it implemented. And none of this is happening overnight. You are 100% correct about that. And so it requires attention to just pull together this mix of strategies. And I think that's the stage that we're at right now. But I think that there's funding at all levels of government, including ours.
Another question, if I could. Every profession has its own nomenclature, and I'm not familiar with the term missing middle, which was referenced. So could you elaborate on what precisely you mean by missing middle? What type of housing are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, let me get back to this graphic. And boy, do I wish this would click a little faster. So we're getting there. But this is a graphic that is it's pretty widespread and commonly used. But again, you are correct in the planning profession. Oh, wait, no. Oh, no, I clicked one more time. So there we go. This is the missing middle housing. And so I know it's probably small on your screen, so I'll read them to you. They include duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. That's pretty familiar to us. Courtyard apartments, which, would be like single family detached, but as part of a single development and on a single lot, and generally oriented toward each other, toward a shared common area. Bungalow courts are kind of the same, but I guess the courtyard apartments would be attached, and the bungalow courts would be detached. Townhomes, row houses are examples of missing middle housing, as are, kind of the lower rise multiplexes and live work situations. So basically all these formats that are kind of in between single family detached homes and what we think of as an apartment building.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I did see the graphic, but you're right. It's quite it's quite small.
Yes.
And that the captions there escaped my notice. You began the reference, and maybe this was discussed earlier in previous meetings, but at various points you were drawing contrasts between Blanc Township, for example, and there were, I think it was White Lake, and there was a couple of other communities that you referenced. How were those chosen in terms of options for comparison?
Yeah, so they're geographically similar and have some similarities in population. So probably not the exact same number of people, but a comparable configuration and population. Okay.
And I'm sure I have more questions, but I don't want to monopolize the time here. Mark, I think what I want to do is I want to come in and ask some more specific questions, so to expand my own understanding of some of these concepts in greater detail, if that's okay. Maybe we can schedule some time to get together. I don't know, can he hear me? I hope so.
I can hear you. I was just trying to unmute, and sometimes it takes a second. I just realized, by the way, folks, you can push your space bar down and temporarily unmute. So That's what I'm doing, in case you're wondering where my finger was. It's on the keyboard. So yes, sir, we will definitely get together and have that communication, and anybody else who wants to do the same thing. And Leah, I'll probably get you on that. When I'm sitting down meeting, I'll probably pick up the phone and give you a call, so we make sure we give these folks great answers.
Sure.
And if I could have the opportunity to ask one more question of you, Leah.
Yeah.
You mentioned in passing, you mentioned correctly that the Dort Highway extension was going to change the character of that particular area, or the way it's going to develop in that. And you mentioned, I thought it was particularly relevant. You said we've got to make certain that we develop that new reality the right way, or with greater sensitivity. Could you elaborate a little further on what you mean by that?
Sure. I mean, things like, the site development standards in the zoning ordinance. So ensuring that there is adequate landscaping, that the buildings are, if we are taking seriously the idea that we prefer traditional development that is kind of closer, first of all, it's got to have sidewalks. Let's start with that. And then second of all, things like the placement of the building. Is it right up against the sidewalk? Is there a parking lot that separates the sidewalk from there? How are we managing the stormwater? Are we able to transform that stormwater management into an amenity, say in the same way that was done in Heritage Park? Those are the kinds of zoning standards that I think we would first develop a vision for, and then code to require.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, Leah, if I might, I want to kind of follow up on what David brought up on this issue about the need for more, quote, missing middle housing format, because it seems to me that most of those, what you've characterized as missing middle formats, are allowable in our multifamily districts. So what is it? Why are you saying it's missing somehow? I guess.
Well,
Could I chime in? I think I have an answer. Because there just aren't that many of them. I think what we're getting at is, it's a higher density. They are allowed, but we just don't have a lot of them here in town. That would be one way that that's one way I would respond to that. Leah, what else you got?
Well, I think that's where I was headed too. Just because they're permitted, they don't seem to be built. And then coupling that with the survey finding that even of our 90% homeowners, most of whom I assume live in single family homes, because that's the majority of what's in the township, say that there's not enough variety of housing formats. So there are people who already live here who would probably live in those formats if they were built, and there are probably people who don't live in the township because they're not available, and that's what they're looking for. The question is, how do we bridge the gap and go from permitting it to getting it? I mean, and those are big questions, not all of which we can solve. One of them is, finance. It's easier to finance well-known construction formats, and then the other is sort of exposure. If folks don't know exactly what to ask for, then it's hard to demonstrate the demand. And if you can't exactly demonstrate the demand, then it's hard to get somebody to invest in it. So it's our job to kind of get ahead of that conversation and to be the liaison between the folks who would make it happen and the folks who would like it to happen.
Okay, but it's still, am I correct though? I mean, the formats are permissible in our multifamily district. So it may be that for whatever reason, developers aren't coming in with proposals for those types of developments, and maybe that means the demand isn't there. I don't know. That's just not sure why, we're characterizing those formats as missing in the sense, because that implies to me that we're somehow not allowing them, or, putting roadblocks in the way to those types of developments. And I don't see that.
Yeah.
Let me chime in for another second here. What I would like to say is there tended to be a sense that the township overall wasn't real excited and enthusiastic about having, multiple family or apartment types of development. What we're getting from this master plan, which is part of the reason we do it, is that we're identifying that there's a need and a desire amongst our community members to look into that and to try to accommodate that. And so, I think that's kind of where we're heading here, is realizing that we do allow for it. But I think another thing that we're also looking at is whether or not we want to tweak the future land use map or do things like that to provide for more of it. In other words, other areas where it might be, more effective, more conducive to being developed in some areas as opposed to others. So yeah, I think there's some work to do there as far as, you know, fleshing that out. But that's kind of how I've seen it. I've been here a few years now, and generally speaking, you know, there hasn't been an awful lot of real support overall. People don't come in and say, boy, I can't wait to get some more apartments. You know, it's usually a little different kind of attitude, if you will, towards that, sense towards that. And so this is telling us a little bit different story. And so the powers that be have the opportunity to hear the community's comments, and we get the opportunity to respond to that and hopefully incorporate provisions into our master plan that accommodates what the community's wishes are, and then prove our worth by allowing it when the time comes.
Make a comment? This is Al. I think Ms. Coulter's comment, I think you know, the team supports the kind of the overall idea of want to encourage new and different kinds of housing formats. So maybe it's just a semantics issue, or just how it's phrased as missing middle that may be more of an issue than maybe a disagreement with the desire for additional housing formats.
Sure.
Is there anyone else that want to make a comment this evening before we move on to something else? No? Okay. I have some comments that I've written down as well. I've got to get them into a little bit better format, and I'll try to identify page markup and send that in. Would encourage everyone else to do the same who has, and I know that a number of people have already done that. All right, move on. Okay with that, Mr. Lloyd? Well, you gotta hold down that space bar.
Yeah, what did you ask me, sir? I'm so sorry.
You okay if we move on to another topic?
Oh, please, yes, by all means, yeah.
Thanks, Leah.
Yeah, if you're following the agenda, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And so if there's another area to go and allow the folks that might want to comment on this, you know, that would be I don't know if you feel we're ready for that.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Kind of forgot.
Yeah.
Anyone else that's on the call outside the planning commission who would like to make any comments, we appreciate that input as well.
Right.
Feel free to send things in if you don't want to speak up today, but this is an opportunity to speak up and let us know what you're thinking.
Hi, Steve Pearson,
Yes, sir.
developer. We have an interest in the 69 acres on Hill Road, just east of Center, which is on the south side of the road. Leah, great job. Planning Commission and Mark, some very good insight, and I appreciate all the information. One question I do have is the tentative master plan, is it available right now for the public or for us to review?
I muted myself. No, not yet. So the planning commission gets to, you know, make sure that it says what they really want it to say before it goes to the public.
Okay. All right. So we just keep attending the meetings, and can we get some input or more insight of your future vision for that region or that district?
All
Sure.
of them, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hey, great job. I thank you. I'm checking out, and I appreciate everything you guys do for your community.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Anyone else that is still held on that would like to say anything? In the audience? One last chance for tonight. No, we welcome any input. whether it's today or another day. Appreciate that.
And we can reach back out to all the folks who are in attendance on this. We got phone numbers and a lot of names and stuff, and we can make sure that we convey information to them on all of our next meetings and stuff. If that's something that the commission would want us to do, happy to do that. Makes good sense. We'd like to have a good following, that's for sure.
All right, I think we'll then close the master plan discussion and move on with our agenda. There's not a lot left on there. Next normal item on our agenda is new business. I don't believe we have any other new business for this evening. If somebody wants to correct me on that, then we would move on to committee reports. Mr. Mansour, do you have anything?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lloyd, do you have anything else you wanted to bring up, or we cover everything from a planning and zoning standpoint?
Well, I sent out the monthly report today, so please check your emails and read that. It's full of wonderful, good, interesting information. All stuff you guys have done for the most part, so thank you. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, I should point out that, what I would like to do and is, I think that what we ought to do is find some time, and maybe it needs to be this next meeting or something even in between. But I do need, and I would love to get more comments from the commission with regards to the future land use exercise. Even if you just give us, something brief. But we've gotten a few, and thank you to everybody who's taken the time to do that. I would love to be able to bring all that together and have us make some determinations on that exercise and that work. You can tell by the interest the folks in the audience have displayed that they're knowledgeable of that. And, I realize that, it's likely not all of them will be changed or whatever, but, I think they're all worth taking a look at. And for those of you who haven't, please just take the time to do it, or at least let me know you're not going to, so I'm not waiting, and then we can just deal with the ones that we have. But, let's just follow up on that, folks, if you don't mind. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay. Is Mr. Brown still on? I don't know if he dropped off. I guess we'll skip over zoning board of appeals for this month. Site plan review, and Mark, and I'm going to need your help here. I don't have the document with me at my desk. We did see two site plans. Both of them had to do with I don't know what I call mini storage. Correct.
One was Zito Construction, wasn't it?
Yeah, we. If I could, Dan, I'll let you know what happened there. Here's Ed calling me. I'm going to put him on. Ed, I can hear you, and other folks will be able to in a minute.
I got knocked off and I couldn't get back on.
All right, we can all hear you now, so just know that. Don't call me any names. Okay. Anyway, yeah, the Reed Road project, it's a storage facility. It's approved by the site plan review committee. It's about 20,000 square feet in all, but what they're doing is putting in larger storage units so folks can use them to store their, antique cars or car collection or motorhomes and stuff. So it's a little bit
you and I talked about that. Yes.
a bigger deal than I was thinking. And then the other item that I would point out was the Zito construction, as you mentioned, Vince. That is a really nice building that they're building off the right on the north side of Baldwin Road. They did a beautiful design on that. It was the old lumberyard over there for folks who know the area. It's the old
Wicks.
Was it 94? What was it?
Wicks lumber.
Yeah, okay, yep. And so, it's just a beautiful plan, and I'll take the time and send that out to everybody. You should see the elevations and all of that. It's really something else. And I do have the Elga project, if you guys remember that. We approved that not too long ago. I have 4 beautiful color elevations that I was able to have them send to us, and I've got those mounted in the front lobby at the Township Hall. So, we want to start, displaying that kind of stuff, these great projects that we get, and make folks aware of what we're doing. It's kind of tough now. We don't have a big crowd coming through, but it's there. And I actually put a picture of the display in the recent monthly memo. So again, take a look. And I'll send bigger copies of that out to everybody so you have them. It just made me realize all of these site plan review things. If I haven't been, I should, I'll make sure I send those copies to the entire planning commission. I think we sort of do a little bit of an update like we're doing now, but I don't know that we ever send you plans, so we might as well make you fully aware of what they're doing. But I think that takes care of it, huh, Dan?
I think so, yeah. Mr. Brown's back on. Is there anything regarding zoning board of appeals you want to bring up, Ed? Well, I don't know, Mark, because you're muted that we can't hear Ed.
Elga has broken ground. So in other words, they were moving dirt around in there this afternoon.
Okay.
Elga Federal Credit Union, right there on the corner of, I never can remember the name of that street.
Yeah, Hill and Grand Point.
Yeah, Grand Point Parkway, yes.
Yeah. Beautiful building.
Yeah, and what else? There was something else that I was going to say, but now it's gone. Dan, were you asking me something?
Yeah, did you have anything from a zoning board of appeals standpoint you wanted to bring up?
No, there's nothing right now.
Okay.
The only one that we did is we met with the developer out there on McCandlish Road, where he has a client that wants to build a beautiful new home out there, and so I went out and talked to him in advance and was taking a look at the property and everything, and so he came in, and the next door neighbor, it's on a cul-de-sac, and she was there and supported everything that he was asking for, and he ended up with the variance was just minor, if I recall correctly. I would say that's the way I certainly viewed it. What do you think, Mark?
Oh yeah, they needed I think a 5-foot setback variance on, had 5 frontages, or 5 yards property lines. It's just an awkwardly configured piece of property in a cul-de-sac. So it had all the things it needed for, practical difficulties and things of that nature, undue hardships and whatever. So it was an easy one for the commission. Plus it's I don't know, 20,000 square foot house or something amazingly large.
I think 18,000.
Yeah, sorry, I'm an exaggerator.
Yes.
But it was big and beautiful.
It almost rivals Vince's home.
Yeah, right, almost.
But anyways, that's really all there was, and it's going to be a beautiful addition to that development.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ed.
Is there anyone else who want to bring anything up before we take a motion to adjourn?
Chairman, this is Vince. I will make a motion that we adjourn the meeting at, 9:03?
We have to wait a minute. Motion by Mr. Bandersky to adjourn. Support. I'm sorry, who was that by again? Mr. Mansour?
Yep.
All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Not. We are adjourned at 9:03 as Vince stated. Thanks for everyone's participation and patience with the electronic format.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.